Good afternoon. It is a delight to be with you all, to be with you who are in the room, to be with you all who are on Zoom. And we also know that there are folks joining us on Facebook Live and who will be watching the replay. So welcome to all of you, and welcome to you, Charles. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Of course. Deeply, deeply honored.
Thank you. I think most of us know Charles Booker, but just for those who may not or who may not know a lot, let me share a little bit about him. Charles Booker is a lifelong Kentuckian, born and raised in the West End of Louisville, where he's now raising 3 daughters. After earning his BS and JD from the University of Louisville, Charles went on to dedicate his life to public service. He has fought for equity and justice at every level of government, including being elected to the Kentucky House of Representatives in 2018 as the youngest Black Kentucky state legislator in nearly 90 years. As a legislator, Charles fought for issues such as common sense, gun safety, lower prescription drug prices, voting rights, racial equity, criminal justice reform, environmental justice, workers' rights, fairness, and human rights for all. Charles rose to national prominence in 2020 following an improbable, people-powered run in the Kentucky U.S. Senate Democratic Party primary, in 2022. Charles led his historic grassroots movements in another run for U.S. Senate, becoming the first Black Kentuckian to receive a major party nomination for the office. Charles is a published author of the noted memoir From the Hood to the Holler. If you haven't read it, give it a read. And featured in the award-winning documentary also entitled From the Hood to the Holler, which I would also recommend. Building on his vision of empowering voices in all marginalized communities, Charles founded Hood to the Holler, a people-centered organization focused on building coalitions across urban and rural divides to strengthen democracy and end generational poverty. Charles is continuing his service by leading organizing and coalition efforts as Kentucky State Director of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives in the Office of the Governor. So, thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you.
Are you ready to get into the conversation?
I sure am.
Great. We'll pass the mic back and forth.
Okay.
So this is a peacemaker conversation, and the question that I always like to start with is, what does peace mean to you? And would you call yourself a peacemaker, or is there another way that you would describe yourself?
Okay, first of all, since I have the mic now, I'm going to say thank you into the mic. And I really want to thank you all for giving me the chance to be here. I'm so humbled I could cry about it. I don't take moments like this for granted, to just connect and to build together. So I want to love on you, especially in these crazy times. And you asked about whether I consider myself a peacemaker. You know what? I'm going to claim it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to claim that I am a peacemaker, and I'm going to keep working to live up to that. I believe we should all find a way and find the courage to strive for that in our own unique ways and shining our own light. And, peace for me, and I think it really came to bear for us as a community on the national stage in the wake of what happened with Breonna Taylor. Of course, this is generations of a fight for peace, which is, to me, a state of existence where love and humanity and justice are a fiber and centered in everyday life. But there's a common refrain in protests where you say no justice, no peace. And it gave a new chance for us to talk about what peace actually is. Because some would hear that and say that, okay, if there's no justice, then that means there's going to be violence or disruption. But what we were really saying is peace can't exist without justice, without acknowledgement of humanity, and without love in action, and without faith in action. And so that's what I think peace is.
Thank you. And as you were talking about the no justice, no peace, I'm also aware that I've seen a no justice, no peace, and then also no justice, KNOW, justice, KNOW, peace. It's a both and. When we know justice, we will know peace. And I love what you said too about claiming it. Of this is what I'm aspiring to. I often talk about myself as an aspiring peacemaker. So thanks for being an aspiring peacemaker also, or to claim it.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have dedicated your life to public service, and right now you are the Kentucky director of the faith-based and community initiatives. And I'd love for you to talk about serving in the government, what the challenges are, what the blessings are, and then also specifically about the work that you're doing right now.
So I almost blurted out, challenges indeed. The challenges in government, who knew? I never sought out to be a public servant. I just wanted to fight for my family. There were things that I saw, and I still live on my childhood block. So I'm on 35th Market to this day. And there were so many things I saw growing up that hurt me. But also inspired me to want to be better, to want to do better, to be a voice for the types of changes I felt like my community and my family, which you all are my family, that we deserve. And after bugging enough people and making enough noise, you just sort of organically find your way into the halls of government, because that is one of the central spaces where decisions are made that shape our lives. And so if you're pushing for change long enough, you're going to bump into government. It's just unavoidable. And that's what happened to me. And once I got into space, I'm like, oh, well, shoot, I need to be in here. I need to get to work in here. And so I haven't looked back. And I've been causing good trouble in every single office I've been in. I love seeing the governor's face when I walk in, because he knows I'm going to bring something interesting. And this office, the Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives, it's not new. It's been around through Democratic and Republican administrations, but it's been dormant. It's the type of work that so I'm a preacher's kid. I grew up in the church. My mom's a pastor in Louisville now. And in every space that I'm in, I'm always trying to engage the folks on the ground, as I say, the people that are in community, that do the work, that are putting love into action. And again, if you do that, if you're pursuing that, you're going to find communities of faith. It just never fails. And so trying to implement a space that holds agency and listens to faith leaders, organizers on the ground, it's not easy, because a lot of agencies and a lot of politicians feel like it's in the way. A lot of people in politics will talk about faith, but do they make room for it? Those are totally separate things. And so I'm working with all the cabinet secretaries, all the commissioners and the directors to ask a central question with every program, every budgetary decision: how are we making sure the people who need it the most are getting access, are getting the money, are getting the resources? And are we listening to the people in the community who are trusted to make sure we do that? And like I said, I grew up in the church. I was in church 6 days out of the week. And there wasn't an issue that came up in our lives that we didn't get counsel from our church, from our pastor, our bishop, where we didn't get support and love from the congregation, from the members. And so to me, it was just a natural thing to say, if we want Kentucky to be better, we have to listen to people who are leading in communities of faith, which isn't just in the walls of organized religion. It's people who put their values into work, who lead with these core values that cut across any divide that could exist. And so I work as an advisor to the governor. So again, when I come in, he knows that I got something to say. But it's been a really powerful opportunity to show something different. And you will hear the governor talk a lot about caring for one another and loving your neighbor, and lifting up faith, and talking about how we are all special. We are all deserving of love and care. And those are the types of conversations we talk about in, whether it's rebuilding homes, providing programming and funding for seniors to stay in their homes, helping to repair roads and bridges. All of it is about how do we put love into it, and how do we listen to people who need our services, our good work the most.
Thank you. I love that idea of how do we put love into it? How do we put love into it? And really the profound act of listening, because listening, when we really do it, it is a profound gift. Yeah. Thank you. So you're doing that work, and you also have your organization Hood to the Holler, which is building bridges. And I would love for you to talk about some of the initiatives, some of the work that organization is doing, and maybe even tell us a little bit more about how it came to be. And if you have maybe a story of unexpected coalitions, I'd love to hear that too.
Yeah. Oh, I have plenty of those stories. So I know you saw me when I walked in. You've seen me before. I would say I typically say I'm a young Black guy from the hood. I'm not as young as I have been. I got some new grades coming in. I'll be turning 40 this month. Honestly, I'll say it so that I can hear that from someone. I hold on to that. And have you all heard about Hood to the Holler?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good. Well, for those who haven't, that means we got more work to do. So Hood to the Holler really began as a rallying cry for me, because like I said, so growing up in the church, I grew up in a Pentecostal church. There's a lot of call and response, and it's a way to fellowship. It's a way to encourage worship, but it's also a way to just build community. And a lot of the chants that you even hear in movements, a lot of that stems from the church, And so it fell on me. I was in Eastern Kentucky, and I was doing I wrote about this. So if y'all haven't read the book From the Hood to the Holler, you should, because it'll give you a clearer picture. But I was in Eastern Kentucky, and I stepped out on faith because I wanted to go knock on doors and talk to people who don't typically get a knock from someone who is registered from a different party. Certainly from someone who looks like me. And I was saying, in order for us to change things, we got to show up. And so we pulled some lists, and these were longtime Republicans, independents, some Democrats, but these were folks that typically don't vote. And all the political advisors were like, it's pointless to go there. And my response is, that's why I have to go, because y'all think it's pointless. And I know it's not. So I'm going to knock on doors. And in the course of just being in the mountains are the most beautiful place. Oh, it's so beautiful there. I was seeing homes that looked like homes in the Russell neighborhood. I talked to people who had experiences like my family. I have a really big family. And it sort of fell on me because I was like, well, what do I say to help people see what I'm seeing? To let them know that we're actually in this together. And I thought about just alliterations, and I was like, well, hoods and hollers. I'm from the hood, I'm going in the hollers, And I'm thinking on it, I had my campaign manager with me, and I'm like, you know what, we're going to tell this story from the hood to the holler. And like when I said that, we were like, that's it. It was one of those eureka moments. And from then on, that became the theme. And I love when I get to share about it because it's not about a geographical story in as much as it is about a coalition story, a story of resolve, a declaration even, that we are family, that we're in this together. And us saying that and leaning into that, there's a power from it. The power to change politics, the power to ultimately end poverty, I believe. Because the power is in us, in the people, not in those politicians who often don't really care much about us. That is not a partisan statement. Everyone's not like that. And I said, I'm fortunate I get to work with a governor who is not like a lot of folks. I give him a hard time too. But this organization was really my way of bottling this up and scaling it the idea of relational organizing, building coalitions, telling the story, doing a lot of storytelling of connections that people may not see, and tying them to issues that may often be siloed. So, for instance, voting rights, or even the opioid epidemic. There are issues that affect all of us that are often told in silos that would make us think that, me dealing with opioids in the Western Louisville is so disconnected from someone dealing with opioids in Appalachia. And as soon as we realize that we're fighting so many of the same battles, we're unstoppable. And so this organization does a lot of training around storytelling, building capacity to get involved in the democratic process, and we do a lot of relational organizing on issues. So this organization is not about political party. Our issues are bigger than that. We are simply training folks to show up in communities to say, what's bothering you? We often say, what's pissing you off? I hope that's okay. I'm sorry about that. And then we take actions to support folks in their community on issues they care about, whether it's a housing project, clean water project, addressing fear and pain over gun violence, and then, of course, helping with the restoration of voting rights, telling the story of, okay, you have a voice. Here's how we build collective power. Now let's use it in the democratic process to change things. And voting is a part of that. And so Governor Beshear, now Governor Beshear, signed the executive order, put it back in place to restore voting rights for, was it 300,000? It wasn't the full amount because my bill was for everyone. But it restored voting rights for a lot of people across Kentucky in urban and rural communities. But a lot of them didn't know it. And so my organization worked with our table. There's organizations across the state to go door to door to say, hey, you got your rights back. And this is why you should use it. And we're going to help you through this process. And we're not going to leave your side. So we have organizers in Appalachia that have been working throughout the year. So not just during campaign time. And I've stepped back from the organization formally because I ran for U.S. Senate. I was a little bit crazy there, and I'm still crazy. Don't worry about it. The right type of crazy. But the organization is still going strong, and I'm excited to see people who are getting involved and taking leadership, that are running for office, that are becoming citizen lobbyists, that are taking action in their community when they didn't think their voices mattered.
Thank you. You mentioned, as you were talking, addressing gun violence, and you have been personally affected by gun violence. You have had numerous cousins, at least as of the documentary. You had 5 cousins who've been killed using guns, and so I want to talk about it really kind of from 2 levels, from a heart level and also from a head level. And the heart level question is, what do you do? How do you hold the grief? How do you hold the probably rage? How do you hold the pissed off? How do you hold that when it happens over and over and over again, not just with people who you know and love, but we also know that it's a problem in our city. And I'll ask the other question too, and that is, what can we do about it? We in the room, and also in other levels.
Well, I'll first say that we can do something about it. And even holding this space and lifting up the power of peace is doing something about it. We are ultimately trying to create an ecosystem and an environment that reinforces the type of community safety that would mean people are not being shot up in their homes or on the street or in their place of worship or in school. So I'll pull back from that. I'll come back to it though. For me, I accept that I'm grieving, and I accept that I will grieve in some way for the rest of my life. And I find humility in the ability to grieve, to have a connection that is so powerful that that connection being broken changed me. And I appreciate that because I've had the chance to be impacted and by people that I love. And I carried the dog tag. If you've seen me, you've seen the dog tag or I got it in my pocket now of my cousin TJ. I've carried this dog tag every single day since 2016. I don't go anywhere without it. And when I got the news that he was murdered on Easter Sunday, a part of me died, but another part of me came alive. And that's the part that gives me gratitude, that I found some new strength that I didn't know existed. I found a sense of calling that I was sort of running away from. And I just accepted that. And I have a lot of gratitude in my heart that I know what I'm here for. You know, I feel a sense of purpose. And yeah, in the documentary, it was 5 at that time. I've had 2 other cousins murdered since then. It had been every year since 2016. And I honestly, this year is not done. And so it's hard for me to say that I haven't lost someone this year, because then I feel like, man, I just messed it up. I just jinxed it. So I hope I have not jinxed it. But I live in my vulnerability, as you can see, and I apply it to how I show up as a leader. And ultimately, what Hood to the Holler is trying to do, what I want to do with that work and just beyond, is help everyone I meet know that their story is powerful, that the pain they've experienced can be used as a fuel to change things, a fuel to love harder, a fuel to be a force for good. And a lot of what we ultimately have to do are the little things all throughout the day. Like I said, holding space like this means something. This is not just a meeting. It's not just a conversation. It means something. And then to take that into engaging the democratic process, engaging corporate leaders, engaging the faith community abroad, engaging neighbors. That's why training and helping and supporting people who are organizing, and a lot of campaigns, political folks use the term organizing. You're essentially building community. If you're actually doing the work, you're building community. You're not just asking for a vote. That is not building community. That is transactional. You're building relationships and you're strengthening bonds. And if we do that type of work, to come out of our corners and see one another as human beings, and then work on the issues we have in common, which we have much more in common than anything that could divide us, and then we translate that into policies, and we translate that into in our business and in our organizations, then we can realize that state of peace. And some of it isn't so far-fetched. Some of the changes we need to see are really clear policy changes that are overwhelmingly supported and low-hanging fruit. But a lot of the reason why we don't see the policy changes are that there's a lot of money vested in keeping things the same. And, you know, in Commonwealth of Kentucky, there are some folks who have been blessed and have resources here, but a lot of people are struggling in Kentucky. Kentucky is still one of the poorer states in terms of our income level. And so what we have to do beyond that, even if we were all mega rich, doesn't matter. The power is in us using our collective voice to change and engage the political process. And ultimately, that's what we got to do. Metro Council level, the state legislature, in Congress, school board, we have to find ways to show up. And I'll tell you this, the folks who have not seen the opportunity to create a space of peace and perhaps are even pushing for policies that would be even more harmful. I'm trying to be very careful with my words here. If you can tell, there are folks that realize what I'm saying here, because if you all notice over the last couple of years, more of the group started showing up at school board meetings, talking about banning books, like my book. Want to ban my book? What's that about? And then, but then also, raising concerns or even pushing back on the notion of how we keep our children safe in school. And again, I want to be very respectful because these are real conversations. I have my position. And if you know me at all, you know my positions. I'm just here to tell you that things can change. Gun violence is a public health crisis. It is not just about someone being bad and wanting to hurt someone. There are a lot of factors that went into that young man pulling the trigger that killed my cousin. I actually met his family. I wrote about this in the book too. I was canvassing in the West End. I'll say this real quick because I went a little bit longer than I was expecting.
It's all good.
I was door knocking in the West End around internet. Again, that's one of those issues that can bring people together because no matter where you are in Kentucky, you've experienced crappy internet. And so I'm knocking on doors to ask folks, well, what would it mean for you to have internet access, to have broadband? What could you do with it? I wanted to help tell the story because we were trying to make a pitch for Google Fiber. Y'all remember that a few years ago? So I was in the mayor's office then. I was doing this. And one of the doors I knocked on, this guy opens the door and a lot of the bookers look alike. I look just like my dad. He has more gray hairs, but I look just like him. You can tell him I said that too. But the guy opened the door and he was like, Charles Booker. I said, yeah. He was like, are you related to TJ? And I said, yeah, that's my cousin. And I saw his face go blank. And he said, oh man, my cousin killed your cousin. If you haven't experienced something like that, I cannot even, it's still hard for me to wrap my mind around the fact that happened. But we were able to build a relationship out of that. And he talked to me about what his cousin was going through, the desperation, the hopelessness that he felt before he had even crossed paths with my cousin to kill him. And if we can see the humanity in people, even when they are on, regardless of what side of the gun they're on, we can put the types of policies and investments in our communities that can create safety, which ending poverty to me is an incredible way to create safety.
Yeah, I just hear the echoes of listening, of seeing the full humanity, of being willing to be with each other in our vulnerability, and also really want to lift up that idea of being in our grief, and allowing ourselves to stay soft in the grief. I think it's the grief that helps us to stay soft and connected, because all of us have experienced in one way or another. Yeah. And so thinking of that, one of the things that's in the documentary is just a few days after the Breonna Taylor protests had begun, and you knew Breonna Taylor, and then David McAtee was killed, and of course people came out to the street to stand vigil, to protest, and of course the police were also there in their gear, and you were there, and you were on the streets anyway. Watching that on in the documentary, I didn't know that you had been there and did not know the role that you had played, and so I'm wondering for others who may not have seen that, if you will talk about that day and what that was like for you, because you were really moving between those who are out in support of his family and then also the police.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try to be tighter with my response here because this stuff is bringing so many memories back.
Yeah. You can say as much as you want.
Okay.
One more.
I believe that we all have a unique space in the world. There's a uniqueness to who we are that helps the collective, that helps the body. I feel like we are all connected and we all have a special part to play. And that was one of those moments where I knew this is why I'm here. I was not prepared to be in the middle in that way. I just knew I had to show up, and it's what I naturally do. And so it is the most fulfilling thing to know that you have a place and you have an opportunity to help and contribute, and then you have a moment where you could fall back from that or you can lean into it. And I leaned in a way that could have gotten me hurt. In the wake of David McAtee being killed, and he was still in the street. I'm so amazed that there were cameras that caught that stuff. I did not know that people were recording this. And of course, everybody has a cell phone now. So when I saw the footage, I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah. I could not believe it was documented. Yeah. But I lived just a few minutes away from where David was gunned down on Broadway. And I couldn't go to the campaign office because I was getting messages. People were saying, hey, Charles, you got to get out here. It could get bad. And so I went by myself, which my staff was really upset with me. And when I got there, it was like a movie. Like I said, you could see David. And there was a line of police officers, and they were trying to protect the scene. And it was like the Broadway was the sea, was this chasm. And on the other side were all of the residents, the community, that was just so devastated and shell-shocked by what was happening. And it was turning into, we're done with this. We matter too much to just accept this. We're not going to accept this. We don't want to hurt anyone, but we're not going to accept things staying this way. And I felt all of that. And, from the law enforcement perspective, I saw them sort of clenching up, embracing. And again, not necessarily because they wanted to hurt anyone, but they had a job to do. And in the midst of trying to do a job, I think they had some blinders on. And I understand. But I think they had some blinders on to the fact that on the other side of the street were people who were grieving. The anger was really just from a place of deep, deep hurts. And I have told the mayor so many times, Mayor Fisher did, and we've talked about this, that in times when people are grieving, the most important thing you can do is be there, be present, be accountable, and just love on them. And I'll step back from that because that wasn't happening. Okay, so I knew the major, and I'm talking to folks in the community saying, hey, wait a minute, you all. I know they're trying to protect this scene so that we can make sure that we understand what happened to David. But I also understand why you're upset. And next thing I know, the officers picked up the bats, and it went to another level. It was really terrifying because you could feel that at any moment the barrier was going to break, and folks were going to rush over there to try to get David out the street, and they weren't going to let those police stop him. And that could have been a horrible day for our city. And I was like, I have to figure out a way to do something, because I know why the officers have struck this posture. I know why the residents and the citizens are in this space of deep fear, and we're not seeing each other. So somebody has to try to help us see one another so we can calm this down. And so I had two conversations. I went to the major and said, hey, I understand what you're trying to do, but by the officers picking up weapons, it gave a sign to the residents and citizens that you're not here for us. Because mind you, the people that are crying are David's family, his neighbors, people that he fed. And so you're telling us by this posture that you're not here for us, but I know you are. So what can we do? Can you put your weapon down to let them know I'm not here to hurt you? And they were like, well, no, we can't do that. That's above our pay grade. You got to call the mayor. Only the mayor can do that. So I called the governor, and I'm like, we got to get the National Guard out of here. And then I called the mayor. I said, well, the mayor, the officer said they'll put their weapons down in a sign of solidarity so that the residents know they're not here to hurt them. But they'll only do it if you tell them. And I'm telling you now, if you don't tell them, this will be the worst day in your career. It will follow all of us the rest of our lives because it is that bad now. And so he said, okay, Charles. I handed the phone to the major, and the mayor told him to put the weapons down. And they said, okay. And then I ran because I knew I was running out of time. So I hurried up back across the street and said, hey, hold on, wait a minute. They're actually going to put their weapons down to let you know they're not here to hurt us. They're not here to keep us from David. They just have to protect the scene so that we can honor him and know what happened to him and make sure his family gets the closure they need. Now I know you're mad. You have every right to be mad. And if you want to run across there to get David, even if it means you pushing those officers out of the way, then fine, I'll do it with you. And then we're all going to be in trouble. But if you allow them to do their job so that we can get David out of here, we can leave here and everyone can be okay to keep fighting. And they listened, and folks started singing Amazing Grace, and the street was quiet. And there was a lot of, you could hear a pin drop. And then Pat Matheson is who it was that started singing Amazing Grace, one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. And I just am so thankful that I was present to be a voice.
Thank you. Just to interject for just a moment. If you can hold the mic a little lower on your mouth.
I was getting a little feedback.
It's just affecting the sound on Zoom. It's perfect in here, but
Okay.
it doesn't happen with you, Cory. You must be holding it a little bit lower.
Okay.
So just a little bit lower, and I hate to ask that right after the powerful story.
Well, look, most folks get the issue of put the mic closer to you now.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know it has something to do with that. Thank you.
I just want to honor that story because, again, I think when we are on a particular side, we forget the humanity of the people on whatever we deem to be the other side. And what I just hear you name so clearly is like that you really had an understanding of, that there are people out here and they're here to grieve, and there are people out here who have a job that they need to do, and can we honor that for each other, so that there is the best outcome possible in a really, really terrible situation. Yeah. I have dreams about when I think about 2020 and being out on the streets, like, what would have happened if instead of coming out in riot gear, the police had come out and said, tell us.
Yeah.
Tell us. Tell us your pain. We want to know, and we're able to hear it.
Yeah.
And then I also think about what would it be like to be a police officer out on the streets and have all of that emotion coming at us. Yeah. I have more questions, and I'm also aware that our time is passing, and I'm wondering if there are folks here who would like to ask a question. I'll give the last question, but if there's someone here who has a question for Charles, I would invite that and welcome that. And will you tell us your name, because folks on Zoom won't be able to see you.
I'm Will Warner, and I come to the Senate occasionally. Thank you. My question is hopefully brief. My question is hopefully brief. How do you handle when peacemaking causes conflict?
Love that question.
That is a great question. Well, one of the reasons why one of the reasons why I embrace the idea of good trouble, and I had the fortune of being able to talk to Congressman John Lewis before he passed about good trouble, and there are times when disruption has to happen. There's a status quo of things, and changing the status quo might mean that some things break, some things are reoriented, and that in and of itself can be painful in some ways, which is why we need community. Because to even change things that are harmful, to do things that would be healing, requires us to love a lot of people who might be injured by those changes or made uncomfortable. And so what I ultimately do is appreciate the fact that that's true. I stand in my integrity. I try to see the humanity in others and to appreciate that everyone doesn't see the world the way I do, and that change is hard for a reason. And then I accept that I may not make everyone happy, but love is front and center. In the legislature, I have to do this all the time. I'm like, look, I'm going to vote against your bill with everything in me, but I love you. And you gotta mean it. It takes some work. But it really is a profound thing to be, I think when we're fighting for peace, to find a way to have some peace within, it gives you the chance to sort of zoom out of the fray. And that is a very powerful opportunity to, like I said, hold space for the conflict, to let it exist, because something good could come out of that conflict.
Then one of the things that comes up for me too in thinking about that is I think sometimes people equate conflict with violence, and conflict and violence might go together, but they don't necessarily. So I hear you really talking about conflict being generative and distinct from violence because of that position of love. And I love what you said too about you gotta mean it.
Yeah.
I do nonviolent compassionate communication work, and I say people can feel when you're trying to connect. We can feel when you're trying to connect, and we can feel when you're doing something that's transactional. So thank you.
Yeah.
Is there another question in the house? Yep.
My name is Joy, and the question is the issue of trauma. There's, with any incident, like when you're the man you met, the cousin of the cousin, that young man, he had things going on in his life. Behind gun violence, behind drugs and alcohol, there is so much trauma. And peace is, we can talk about it, but how are we helping others to heal through their traumas to get to that place of peace?
Yeah. I'm never gonna forget this mic thing because I'm typically good at the mic. But your question, and first of all, I'm grateful that your name is Joy. Very, very on time. I think to your question of trauma and how we tend to it, again, if you are doing that work, you're going to find yourselves ultimately in the spaces where laws are made, where policies are made, and it can inform the types of policies you support. It can inform the type of people you vote for. And so all of this stuff is connected. And so for me to say healthcare is a human right, it comes from this value place of understanding that mental health affects how people learn, how they are able to be gainful citizens, how they're able to raise a family. All of these things are connected. And that's where I think issue-based organizing is so important. And storytelling through that as a way to bring people in is really important because it gives us more muscle to advocate for changes, to advocate for accountability in government, but also in business and in community. And so one of the ways that I talk about healthcare and why I believe everyone should have high quality healthcare, regardless of how much money they have, is through telling my own story. I actually posted about it yesterday. As I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I've had times where my medication was so expensive that we had to walk out of Walgreens. My mom and I had to walk out because she didn't have enough money to keep me alive. And just remembering that trauma, because even to this day, I got my prescription yesterday for my pods. I have the pod and the sensor. And every time I'm in the pharmacy or in the drive-thru, I have a lot of anxiety. Now, I know I have enough to cover it now, but I'm still afraid of, well, what if my card declines? Or what am I going to do if I leave out of here and I can't get this? And I allow that to inform how I advocate. And so I think if we can do more storytelling about the humanity of when gun violence happens and when we are experiencing trauma, we can humanize trauma, and not just for political expediency, because when there's a school shooting, the person who perpetrated it a lot of times will get humanized. The media will humanize the person, and it's an important thing to do, to understand what actually was happening, so we can be more responsive and more loving and address those harms. But a lot of times they're just doing it to create a narrative that some people are humans and some people aren't. So if we don't do it for political expediency and actually humanize and put a face behind trauma, we can help more people see their connection to it. And then over time we can change things. So.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more. Well, it's a few questions, but to end our time together. And I'm wondering where you find hope. Who and what are your guiding lights? And what opportunities do you see for us in these very challenging times?
Oh, what a question. That's the way to bring it up. I'm thankful that I get to answer this question now. I have been going through therapy for the last year and really just talking through life, forgiving myself, reckoning with pains that I had as a child that I didn't realize were manifesting in me as an adult, and just understanding my feelings and accepting the grief and the shame and the sense of failure that I may experience, and being okay. And one of the things that I get hope from are the lessons I learned. Every day that I can learn something or get a small victory, make some progress to be a better version of myself, gives me hope that it's possible. that I can keep doing that. And imagine if we are all as a society on this journey of being the best version of ourselves and celebrating those victories and celebrating one another in those victories, then yeah, we can change things, and beyond that, I take hope from my daughters. I have my 3 girls. I always say they're my bosses, but I'm trying not to say that. I've tried to get away from it because they believe it. But they are my everyday inspiration. And then all of you. And when I said I could cry just from being in here, knowing that these conversations exist, knowing that you exist, and the space that you hold gives me hope. because I believe in us. I believe the love is real. I believe that healing is possible. And I've seen too many miracles to believe that there aren't more left. So I know that things are difficult. I get excited when things get hard because that means there's even more opportunity to do good, to change things, to be better. And we have plenty of opportunity to do that now. So I think that what happened with Breonna Taylor and then the storms, when the flooding, and there are folks dealing with this hurricane now where people are, whole communities have been washed away again. And it's going to keep happening if we don't collectively respond to climate chaos. I'll sit that down for a second. But in Kentucky, so we had the tornado that just, historic tornado ripped across Kentucky, dozens of counties. And then in eastern Kentucky, this historic 100-year flood. And I stood in spaces in both places where I stood in West Kentucky. I was on the plot where a church once stood, and it was completely gone. The whole area was gone. I stood in a man's living room. There was nothing there. And I actually recorded that we prayed together in that spot because his home was completely gone. In those moments, people came together in a way that you cannot help but have hope. To see humanity sort of step up and say, okay, all right, we got to set the differences aside. We got to stop the BS. I'm sorry, you all.
I feel like we've heard that word before.
Yeah, I just want to be respectful. But that humanity sort of stood up in the front and said, okay, it's my turn. And we got it in us. We forget it. And there are a lot of interests that hope we forget it. I think the power of the Rainbow Coalition, I think Hood to the Holler, these types of messages are about us remembering how powerful we are and all the great things we could do together. And it's still possible. So I still have hope.
Yeah, just want to repeat that idea of remembering how powerful we are collectively, and also raising up the idea of I've seen too many miracles not to believe that there are not more coming, and we can be the ones who help those miracles happen. So thank you for being one of those people who helps the miracles happen. Yeah. If it were up to me, we'd be here for like 3 or 4 more hours, maybe a few days.
I could do it too.
Yeah. So are you saying, is that an invitation?
My girls feel different.
Okay. All right. Well, and they're your bosses apparently. Well, we don't want to mess with them.
It's true.
So thank you so much for being here. Thank you to those who are in the room. Thank you for those who are joining us on Zoom and those who are going to be watching the replay. This is a part of Dreppung Gomang's 12 Days Toward Peace. Tomorrow is the last day. It's Mahatma Gandhi's birthday and International Day of Nonviolence. There are still some events coming up tomorrow, so if you'd like to join, you are invited to do that. And if this conversation has been meaningful for you and you'd like to contribute, some of you already have, and if you haven't and would like to, you are invited to do that through DGCEC's website. It's DrepungGomangusa.org, so that more things like this can happen. And I think it feels right to just say again, thank you, and thank you to Anne, the visionary of 12 Days.